From top to bottom, everything about the Barbie movie had me excited, but a small part of me was always a little bit nervous for it. Maybe it's because I love Greta Gerwig and I was scared of her pairing with a big studio, or that the trailer made it feel like a bunch of humor for 5-year-olds.
I will beat both of you off at the same time.
But you don't even know how to beat yourself off. How are you going to beat both of
Of
us
course
off?
I
It
know how
doesn't
to-
make sense.
This movie had me hyped and interested, but for the weirdest reasons. A big chunk of the hype obviously also came from Barbenheimer, the world-ending double feature of Barbie and Oppenheimer. Both movies contain in total like every actor in Hollywood, from the leads being Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling to Cillian Murphy and Robert Downey Jr. And though my hype for Oppenheimer exponentially increased over the last few weeks, Barbie always held this weird spot of just being an odd movie. Through the trailers, everything seemed to be delivered in a goofy way, but the jokes felt more mature in nature, and the possibility of an existential Truman Show-esque Barbie crisis was also on the horizon since Margot Robbie's Letterboxd account somehow got leaked. But I just got out of watching Barbie, and though I had my doubts, I'm happy to report that Barbie works in practically every way. Before we get into more of my thoughts, of course, please let me know what you guys thought of Barbie in the comments down below, and if you guys will also be doing a Barbenheimer double feature this weekend. But getting to my thoughts on the movie, obviously I was excited going in. I mean, it's Barbie starring Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling, but what had me the most intrigued was the fact that Greta Gerwig was the director behind the camera. Greta Gerwig also wrote this movie with her husband Noah Baumbach, who wrote and directed one of my other favorite movies of all time, Marriage Story. Greta Gerwig has a track record for making two amazing movies, Lady Bird and Little Women, but surprisingly, they're nothing like Barbie in the sense of it's not a big blockbuster movie with a super massively star-studded cast. At least at the time, they were using definitely more underrated actors and actresses in their movies. But here, you have a big blockbuster movie, but how does that mesh with a director that's super individual-led, who has their own vision, and who really showed that they can do what they need to do with their personal vision? How does studio interference get in the way of that? But I'm once again really excited to just say that I think Greta Gerwig completely knocks it out of the park here. She does such an amazing job of telling this story and keeping it grounded on an emotional level, but also just making it a big, massive scale with just an insane production. And I'll get into the story and the production and stuff like that later in this video, but I mean, Greta Gerwig's direction and the way she's able to balance obviously like this big scale story, which again, I don't want to get too much into because I didn't know much about the direction the story was headed when I walked into the theater, but I was pleasantly surprised with how weird and wacky it got in just the Barbie land aspect of it, but also how interesting and thought-provoking it got in the real world, while also taking it back and forth on an emotional level. I will say though, sadly, I think the filmmaking element of it, when you look at Little Women and Lady Bird, definitely is a little bit of a step down here in Barbie. But with that being said, I think the impact of how Greta Gerwig directs behind the camera is 10 times bigger because of her possible scale. Now you can say which one is more important to you, but for me personally, I like that more personal, emotional touch. And I think that's kind of also where Beau is Afraid, which is Ari Aster's newest movie, went out of hand. Because I like Midsommar and Hereditary, and Ari Aster did an amazing job of blending something grounded but also emotional, but Beau is Afraid just went too out there. I think he did too much. But I can safely say with Barbie, it doesn't ever get too much. Obviously, it's way bigger than anything we've seen Greta Gerwig do in the past, but I think all of the cast reels it in to make it more of, yes, a big grand scale story, but you also keep that emotional core with amazing actors and actresses. And the cast of this movie is just absolutely absurd. I'm going to list off a few names, but this isn't even the tip of the iceberg. I mean, obviously you have Margot Robbie as Barbie, Ryan Gosling as Ken, but also Kingsley Ben-Adir, Will Ferrell, Simu Liu, Michael Cera, Helen Mirren, as well as a bunch of other actors and actresses. I can spend all day just naming them, but the main two obviously that I want to talk about is Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling. I will say the two human characters, the non-Barbie characters, I'm forgetting the actresses' names, but they're also amazing. The one that plays the mother, she has this amazing monologue, and it didn't bring me to tears per se. I did come to tears at one point in this movie, which I'll talk about later, but it didn't do something emotionally provoking for me because obviously that moment was targeting women and I just can't relate to that. But I think the delivery of that monologue could have been taken in a very bad way. It could have taken in a very woke way, but I think there was enough passion and understanding and just like belief in what they were actually saying to make it work. And I also have to say the same thing about Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling. I think Margot Robbie has just these insanely intense emotional scenes that you just don't really get in big blockbusters anymore. And I think it works with Greta Gerwig's style of shooting in Little Women as well as Lady Bird, which is these smaller moments where you're just looking at a character's face. But the actor or actress can do so much in such little amount of time that you just get chills in your body. One scene where I really think Margot Robbie excelled and just made me feel chills through my body was when they first got to the real world and she's just looking around at all of these different people and feeling emotions that she had never felt before, that she didn't even know existed. And Margot Robbie does this amazing thing where she can just tear up on one eye and then the other and then the other. It's just on command. And I just felt this like switch in my mind, and it made it feel so existential, yet so narrow and personal all at the same time. And it's funny because even the filmmakers know that Margot Robbie being Barbie and the message of this movie about the perfect woman and what Barbie is and what it was meant to be, all of those messages definitely kind of convolute over one another, but that at its core, the filmmakers knew that they were casting Margot Robbie, a woman that looks practically perfect, as a Barbie that was over time supposed to have this character arc of not being perfect. There's even a joke where the narrator says Margot Robbie was like not the right person to cast for this. It's just funny because it's so meta, yet it works on such an emotional level that you don't really care. I mean, they said Margot Robbie's name in the movie. One thing I did want to mention, which I'm a little bit scared to talk about, is Ken's arc in the movie. I mean, first off, Ryan Gosling gives an amazing performance. Not near the best of his career, but still just an amazing performance. But the thing is, the arc that Ken's character goes on is definitely like toxic male, and it really plays in obviously to the womanhood elements of this movie and how it expresses all of that kind of stuff, making comments on patriarchy, all that kind of stuff. It's hilarious, emotional, it's just really well done. But I also think the way that they express emotion within men is really, really well shown here.
I just don't know who I am without you.
You're Ken.
But it's Barbie and Ken. There is no just Ken.
Which I don't really get to see in a lot of media. I mean, you guys know me, I watch a lot of movies, but it never feels like men are really represented in a well emotional way. There's one line, and don't quote me on this exactly, but Ken says, "I'm a liberated man, I don't cry." There is just so much to unpack. Obviously, after you watch the movie, you know exactly what he's referring to, but it kind of just stuck with me because yeah, this movie talks a lot about womanhood and the struggles of being a woman, but it still finds time to really try and connect with men that aren't as emotionally stable. And I think it's also a weird middle ground because they're not trying to play pity to the men in power, because Ken's whole thing was like, oh, being in power is so much work, I don't get to emotionally like show myself. And I don't think it's necessarily that obviously people are relating to, but it's just more on a level of men aren't able to openly cry and show emotion and stuff like that. It's like, I think Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, when writing this script, they implemented a way for a lot of people to relate to this movie while still obviously focusing on one main subject. But also on the topic of its thematic prevalence, I do think the way that they do the commentary on feminism works really well. Obviously, there's gonna be those stupid people on the internet that are like, it's woke, it's this, it's blah, blah, blah. I don't think it is. I think they handled it very, very well. They also handled it in a humorous way that I don't really know how Mattel allowed this. Like, they're basically on the product of Barbie and the decades, honestly, just the existence of Barbie. They're basically not justifying. Like, they're saying Barbie shouldn't exist. Like, it just does bad.
Do you guys ever think about dying?
Kind of reeling it back from a thematic element, just on a technical level, this movie is also just really well made. I mean, Barbie Land is insane. I think you guys have all seen by now the fact that they like ran out of pink because of Barbie Land. Also, all of the outfits, the set, everything is just so well done, and it does feel like its own world. It feels like its own universe within, obviously, like, it's separated Barbie Land and the real world. And when they go to the real world, it's very well separated on a filmmaking level as well. It's not just that everything feels a little bit more desaturated than a super saturated Barbie world. And I think it's because we start in Barbie Land and we see all of these super amazing world things where women are in power, and then you get to the real world and it's like, oh, this kind of sucks. But with that, obviously, the story of this movie, I can't go into too much detail because I don't want to spoil anything for you you guys, but I think the story does work. Again, it does go hand in hand with the thematic prevalence, along with Greta Gerwig's direction, the cast, the acting, all that kind of stuff, but I think the story does work. My only complaint about this movie, and why I don't think I could give it like a peak, like high score, is because the pacing of this movie feels a little odd. The ending, it definitely has this emotional thing where, I'm not gonna lie, there's this final scene where Barbie is talking to this one character. It's just a one-on-one interaction, and I had tears coming out of my eyes. Like, my brother was sitting next to me. I think he was completely okay. I had tears coming out of my eyes for some reason. I was in it. But what made it more interesting to me was, right when that ended, there was like another small scene, and then the movie was over, and it kind of, I'm not gonna say I felt unsatisfied, because it ended on a joke that made the entire theater burst out laughing, and then that new Ice Spice song started playing.
And I'm bad like the Barbie. I'm a doll, but I still wanna party.
It's like I was having a good time. It was a fire song, but I kind of walked out of that theater and I was like, okay, I love the commentary, I love what they're trying to tell here, but at the same time, near the end, it did feel like there was a whole other act left. It felt like there was like a character there that there was so much more I wanted to explore with, and it kind of felt unsatisfying to an extent. Obviously, like Barbie's arc was a little bit wrapped up. I mean, Ken's stuff was wrapped up. There's like a bunch of like closing things, but I don't know. I just felt something in me that was like, I just want more. And maybe that's a testament to how great the movie is and how much it immersed me in both worlds, the real world and the fake one, and just that blend between the two. Maybe it's that. But at the same time, I do think it's a little bit of just an underdeveloped thematic thing where, yeah, you have a lot of stuff on the surface, but a little bit lower than that, you don't really get that deep, and you don't really get that full understanding of the world, and you kind of want to see more of it because you feel unsatisfied. I will say though, my brother was sitting next to me, and he thought the movie was going on for far too long. He thought it was just going on forever and ever and ever. And I told him, I'm like, no, I thought this movie was going to go for another 30 minutes. And he's like, that would have been way too much. So I think maybe it was just me. Maybe the pacing was just too tight. I also think maybe it was like an emotional thing or a funny thing where there were jokes where the whole theater was laughing probably every 10 to 15 minutes. Every 10 to 15 minutes, there was another joke that had everyone laughing. And so maybe that also just sped it up because everything felt like it was happening back to back to back to back. I don't know, even with that being said, I still loved Barbie. I think so much of this movie works, and it is ballsy in its commentary and its thematic nature, because a lot of studios won't make a big blockbuster studio movie and then have these feminist themes at the forefront, just because sometimes it can seem too forced. But I don't think that's the nature here, just because it is Greta Gerwig and you have these just amazing filmmakers, but also just an amazing and enthralling cast and world, that again, nothing feels forced. Everything feels organic, and at the end of the movie, I just wanted more. But for now, I think I'm gonna give Barbie an 8.5 out of 10. On rewatch, I do think it'll go up a little bit. I just need to sit with it a little bit more and kind of just engage in the world more on another watch. But that is it for my thoughts on Barbie. Again, let me know what you guys thought of Barbie in the comments down below, and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of my other movie or TV show reviews, reactions, or breakdowns. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.